You got a quorum, it's 2:00. Let's call the meeting to order. Kate, by the way. Yeah. It's good to see you. I said hi to Becky. Okay.
Okay, I'll take roll call.
Yes, the Finance and Admin Committee.
Director Daniels,
Here.
Director Lindor,
Here.
Chair Riley.
Here.
All committee members are present.
Okay, let's call it order. Any additions or corrections to the minute? So, the agenda, excuse me.
Not to the agenda.
Not to the agenda.
Nothing.
There might be some minor formatting changes, which we can discuss as we go through the.
Okay. All right, we'll leave that as it is. Any public comment? Anybody signed up?
I have just staff and a member of the board, so we have no public in attendance.
Okay. So action items are adoption of the minutes.
If I could pull the minutes or make a comment on the minutes.
Sure, comments welcome.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that we were asking, I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected, for an actual sort of budget. This is item number 2, consider approval of contribution to the Monterey One Pure Water Monterey Expansion Celebration Event. And I think this might be the clarification that was needed for what ended up coming to the board was yes on excess funds, but I think we were also asking for what the budget was for the event, or we were asking for something that I'm not remembering exactly what didn't come back in the meeting, but it was for.
It didn't come back in this meeting.
But it didn't come back to the board when we met with the board, and I can't remember exactly what we asked, but I thought we were asking for a budget for the event,
Yeah.
what the money was going to be spent on.
Yeah.
And this might be the confusion because it's not in the minutes. That was my only clarification.
Okay. Well, then, what?
Yes, it was, she asked for a detailed budget.
Yeah.
From the FAC. We provided a smaller budget in the board meeting, and then we got into a whole discussion about restroom rentals and, all of that kind of stuff.
And I remember that, yeah.
So, yeah.
So are you, for the clarification,
I'm just suggesting that the reason there was a miscommunication is because the minutes just referred to where the excess funds raised would be applied. And I think the actual question that was raised in our last F&A meeting was requesting a budget. It's all said and done, but just the clarification.
Okay, and clarification was more details for the budget of the event. Okay. Okay, well, we can accept that as modification of the minutes or correction to the minutes. And with that correction, we have a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3 votes for yes. So, That was a motion to approve the minutes with the correction. Yes, okay.
Correct.
Then the next item is treasurer's report for July.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Are we going over this item? This is the monthly treasurer's report for the month of July. The district started with 32.4 million in cash and investments and ended the month with about 30.8 million. So there was a net outflow of funds in July. And this is typical for this time of the year when we have more expenses going out. So we received fee deposits of about 1.4 million, and we had cash disbursements of 3.2 million. And I'm just going to describe what these deposits and disbursements were. In terms of deposits, the major deposits were we received a $700,000 billing for sale of water for the month of June, and we received a user fee in the amount of about $640,000, and the rest were permit fees. In terms of disbursements, we made a $1.3 million payment to Monterey One Water for the May purchase of water. And then if you look at this line item, it says payroll benefit deposits or payments. At this time of the year, we make payment to the California Pension Retirement System. It's for the unfunded accrued liability. That payment was to the tune of about 700,000. And then we also made an insurance payment of about 300,000. That's also an annual payment for property and general liability that's made in July. So we just had more expenses in this month compared to deposits. And I wish I could zoom this in. Let's see.
Michelle, is there a page number in the packet that for you?
Seven?
Yes. Page number 7, thank you. So this is exhibit 2A of the report, page number 7. And a detailed listing of cash and disbursements is shown in exhibit 2B, that's page number 9. And then the statement of revenue and expenses is exhibit 2C, page number 15. And just to perhaps preemptively answer this, we also had excess payments compared to previous years for postage and shipping, and that's all related to direct deposit notices that we mailed for the water supply charge. There were about 32,000 direct deposit notices that we mailed, and that's showing up in this expense report, exhibit 2C.
So what I'd like to do is try to follow on page 7.
Yes.
Some of your discussion, and you mentioned numbers that I didn't necessarily see on the chart. And I think some of you were talking about something at 700,000.
Yeah, that
And I didn't see that, and I'm just wondering, what did I miss?
those are details that are not in the treasurer's report because the treasurer's report is a consolidated view of how much money is in each of the bank accounts and in each of the investment accounts. The 1.4 million that I'm trying to highlight here, that's the total amount that is deposited
Right.
into our bank account, and that's made up of the 700,000 and the 640,000 in user fees, plus some permit payments.
Okay, so I guess what I would like to have you do for us is when you talk about a number that's a consolidated number, that you just slow us all down so that we kind of can pick up on the points you're making. Because when you move so quickly, I'm still looking and I'm not listening, and therefore
Fair enough.
I'm not
Yeah.
getting it. So it would just, so anyway, and then you've done this before, and I'm not doubting the numbers. I'm just trying to
Follow along.
try to follow the details,
Follow the bouncing ball.
follow the bouncing ball. So anyway, in the future, I just hope that you just kind of.
I'll slow it down for sure. Yeah, we've done it so many times.
Number, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Go.
Exactly. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay.
Maybe I should highlight those. So that's the 1.4 and this is the 3.2 million disbursement. Those are the two numbers, kind of important numbers in this exhibit.
Well, I mean, there could be a note page or something on
Sure.
what's combined in a certain number.
Yeah.
And particularly the big stuff. I mean, I'm not so concerned, and I don't know where the cutoff point is, but it's the big stuff that
Right.
gets.
And this $3.2 million number is detailed in exhibit 2B, which is the next report on page 9. So that has a detail of every check, every payment that's going out. And
Okay, and that's 2B. Oh, okay, and that goes for several pages. Yeah.
yeah, that includes rebate payments, vendor payments, payroll, etc.
And what are the payments, by the way, I'm just trying to catch up with some things too. Some of the previous employees, Andy Bell,
Yes.
Joe, there's several numbers.
The district makes a retiree medical payments. If someone has retired with the district and has a vested benefit for healthcare purposes, depending on the years of service that they had, they might qualify for a tier 1 benefit, which is around $1,400 to $1,500 a month, or tier 2, which is around $540 a month. And that's it, just goes towards their medical benefits.
So that's OBEP?
Exactly, other pension employment benefit.
Okay. I'm kind of-
That our child might go OPEB expenses.
And these are vested rights that they've gotten because it's the employment agreement that we have.
It was part of the MOU, with the labor negotiations. And it's all built into the, 3 MOUs that we have.
And this is for life. I mean, right?
Mhm.
Because, okay, I get it. It's not a criticism. I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around lots of things at once.
And I have a question, if I may, on
Yes,
this, on these virtual payments. The SDRMA, the property liability workers' comp, is that like a once a year, once a quarter payment?
This is an annual payment
And it-
for property and general
Okay,
liability.
so that's why it's so big.
It's, very
Okay.
big.
Got it.
What we do is, since we follow what's called a modified accrual basis, even though the money goes out in one shot, it's distributed in the revenues and expense. So if you look at the revenues and expense exhibit, the monthly prorated version of that payment's going to be, will show up every month.
Right. Got it.
Okay, well, we're going to, if we're ready, recommend this to full board for acceptance.
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3 votes yes, motion passes. Okay. Item number 3, let me just make sure I'm, whatever the numbering system is. Okay, item 3 is the proposed financial policy. Here we go.
Yes, I'll take this item as well. So this is an action item that recommends a number of financial policies for the board's consideration. However, the committee has could leave this item on here if there are major changes and bring, we could continue this item for future sessions, depending on, how many changes are there. Or if we are in a good position, then we could recommend it to the board, and then these policies will be reviewed periodically for any changes that might happen from a regulatory standpoint or other operational considerations. So last time, and I'm gonna, the last time the committee has seen policies in Exhibit 3B and C. So these were the reserves policies and the pension and OPEB policy. I'll be speaking to those policies, plus you're also seeing 3 additional policies which are being proposed for operational considerations and also regulatory considerations, which I'll go through in detail.
But I'm going to just slow down just a little bit. I'm not interested in passing this today. I would like to, but I want to get an explanation so we can have some questions or whatever, go back and forth.
Sure.
But what I would like to, I'd like to bring it back a month, but after we kind of exhaust whatever our questions are. And I'd like, I think it needs not reformatted somehow, but the policy statements that I've seen so far have a numbering system and so on. And I would just like to see this a little more organized, like it is a policy. And then you can cite the paragraph as opposed to, on page 39 of the August meeting, or, instead of that, I'd like to be able to go to some kind of numbering system. Even if the numbering system changes ultimately, but at least for discussion purposes, I would like to have us do that. Anyway, so I just want to establish that kind of orientation that I have.
And through the chair, this item is on for recommending adoption by the board, right? You're saying you want it to come back to the committee.
I would prefer that come back here and we have one more shot at it.
That's
We
fine.
take a shot today, and then next time we'll deal with recommend it to the board. There's no sense of urgency about it, but it's kind of
Yeah.
cleaning up a area that we should have some structure to it.
It makes sense. That was just clarification.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
That's right. That's what-
I appreciate that. Thank you. No, that totally works with what we have. So I'll start off where we left in the last committee meeting, and I believe there was a question from the general manager regarding operationalizing the reserves policy and how it would look like. And so I'm going to do a quick recap, but also speak to that question first. So this Excel file, it's going to be a working document for the purposes of explanation. The reserves policy that we have, so we're proposing 8 different, and as we discussed last time, we proposed deleting the litigation reserve and then adding the capital project reserve and a rate stabilization reserve. What the reserve policy does is 3 things. First, it's listing out the reserves that the district will have for what purpose, and then it lays out the minimum target level for each reserves, and then it comes up with a process of assigning surplus funds, which would be excess revenues over expenses, to certain reserves if a certain criteria is met. So that's the piece that I'll just.
Let me just slow down. What this policy does is recommend 8 ways of assigning reserve funds as we choose. 0, don't implement it, or do it, small, large, whatever that choice might be. But the point is, you're recommending that we have a structure for this.
Yeah.
This is the structure.
Mhm.
And that what we do, because our reserves are pretty substantial for a small agency,
Mhm.
which I'm real pleased about. But this is an attempt to establish a structure that we can assign or allocate, I'm going to say both of those words, a part of our reserves. And once we do that, once we assign it, it's not available for operating expenses, right? It's only available for that purpose in that reserve. Is that fair?
Generally, it is. However, the board could say, well, let's say we have this unknown litigation expense that came up, and we would like to tap these other reserves and, meet that litigation liability. So generally, yes, and that's the piece that I'd also like to go over, because we are trying to identify what is the extent of our liability and compare it with how much money we have set aside for that reserve. And if we are below the minimum target level, then certain reserves need to be supplemented. I think, as you will see in this, the amount of liability expense in certain areas is much higher compared to the reserve that we have assigned for that liability. And so it's trying to understand our exposure and put the right amount of dollars or risk management for that exposure. And this is a little bit of an intellectual thought process, but if it gets formulated into a policy, then it would be a consistent way for the district to assign these excess funds.
It sounds like, so you're asking for the policy that would direct outside of the board's discussion, like, we could always have that discussion, and I believe you can always access reserves in a crisis.
Right.
But an automatic assignment if there's a surplus, and we're trying to design the policy to where that would go. Is that correct?
That is right. That is absolutely right. The policy also speaks to that aspect. If we have more money in certain areas, and if these criteria are met, then let's put money where we haven't put enough funds for that liability.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly pension and OPEB. And that's the piece that, if you allow me to walk the committee through this Excel file, and then maybe it might become a little more clear.
Okay, I'm game.
Thank you. I'll try my best to be slow and feel free to interrupt me if I sound. So column C is a listing of all the reserves that we have proposed in the policy. Column D is how much funds have been assigned to those reserves as of June of this fiscal year. The only piece that's outstanding is the general reserve, and I believe we have 19 million there, but this will all be finalized when we have the audited financial statements. But this is for the purposes of this exercise. We're going to pick a number so we can show the committee how the excess surplus gets assigned. The liability is the total pension liability that we have as of now. I think these numbers are based on what the board has seen last year. We have about 7.6 million in pension liability, about 5.2 million in OPEB or retiree medical liability. Asset replacement reserve.
Now, let me just back up a little bit, just so
Yes.
you understand. The liability is a long-term liability. It's not
Yes.
next year's liability.
That is correct.
And
That's
it's
the not
it's a
liability.
phasing in of a allocation of sorts, phasing in order to get close, in order to reduce the liability because we have money set aside. So it's like the actuarial reports we get from PERS.
Exactly.
They say what they need for maintaining some liquidity or allocation amounts that can meet a estimated cost down the road.
But that's growing, right?
Yes.
Isn't that estimated cost growing?
Yeah, and it's growing throughout the state. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so what's being suggested here is that we have a structure now that we can look at future liabilities and chip away at it
Mm-hmm.
as we feel like we can afford it, or the risk is larger or smaller, or whatever it is, or what our capabilities are as well, and what's our revenue sources and so on. But it's trying to get some structure on these future risks that we may have. And I keep saying structure, not an amount of money to deal with it. That's a different decision,
Yeah.
but we're having a structure that we can have this discussion. Okay, okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm not
They
going
don't have this in our package.
now, this is an Excel file. I can change numbers on the fly and we can have a working discussion. That was the thought behind it. The asset replacement reserve is to replace our existing facilities, vehicles, equipment. This is based on the depreciation life of that asset. And it's hard to determine what is the exact liability because a Toyota in 2027 is going to cost different than what it costs now.
Mhm.
When we consider depreciation, we're considering at the cost of purchase. So even if we have money set aside based on the cost of purchase, we don't know the future value. So we probably have less funds that we might need to replace that item in the
This is
future.
today's money and next year's future
Exactly.
bill. Okay.
So how did I come up with this number? We can't precisely determine. I'm just saying, let's say this future liability or expense is going to be 20% higher than what we have here. We don't know that. We could just call it unknown. General reserve. Now, the policy says that we will have enough funds for 6 months of operations. And so we will have, the operating expenses are to the tune of about 12 million. And 6 months of that is around 6 million approximately. And it also says that the general reserve can be increased if we know that there is a one-time expense that the district might incur. And here, we don't know what that, so let's say we are saying here, again, for the purposes of discussion only, that let's say the district has a potential liability of 13 million for the Measure J related case. And this is based on what the town of Apple Valley, I believe, paid out. if, you know, if the eminent domain thing doesn't fall through, then we're just using what they paid. So combining the 6 million and the 13 million comes up to 19 million. And so let's say we are saying, well, our general reserves could be 19 million because that satisfies the minimum target that we have based on these assumptions. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, let's say if our general reserve end up being higher than 19 million, then those general reserves will be reassigned to these three places: pension, OPEB, and capital, based on how the policy, based on what the policy says, basically. The capital project reserve, as mentioned in the policy, is the money that we collect for capacity fees. That money is for future water supply projects. Right now, it gets intermingled with our general reserve. We would like to break it out. And so that's just the excess money. The 964,000 is the excess capacity fees that we had in the last 2 years,
Excess.
above budget. So we said, yeah. We budgeted a certain amount for the capacity fees. The capacity fees came out much higher because of some large, like, hotel projects and such. So, and then rate stabilization reserve, we're not going to go in that direction. If we are a true utility provider, then this is a standard reserve that all utilities have to prevent the sticker shock in terms of, like, let's say the cost of service goes up, then we don't want to pass on that cost to the ratepayers directly. We want to buffer that impact, and that's where the rate stabilization reserve would come into play. So now, see,
Can I go back to that column again for liability?
yes,
When you talk about Apple Valley and the potential loss of the lawsuit, or the Measure J loses.
mhm.
Was that a total amount, or is that paid off over time as well? I mean, I don't know if that's because if it's a lump sum payment, that's kind of one kind of hit, really serious
Yeah.
hit.
Well, that's a great
I
question.
don't know how Apple Valley deals with that.
Dave's probably knows that response.
But what you put in is a number that's a total number.
That's a total number. Yeah, it's not a paid out over a period of time.
Go on the low monthly installment plan to the attorneys.
I just wanted to point out that number is a total number, whereas PERS and OPEB are not total numbers. They're kind of annual.
These are also total numbers. The 7.5 million, everything is a total number.
For today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as of today, or whenever we receive those.
But that whole approach is a year after year
Yeah,
after year.
it moves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, just in my mind, one's a full number to get it off the books. The others are a total number that
And
goes on and on.
And I'll jump in just for a second. So Michelle talks about those pension reserves and those liabilities. Is that, you know, ultimately they want everybody to, like, be at 100%, you know, totally funded. And that's just not a reality, I don't think, in a lot of, you know, small, medium sized districts or utilities. And so, you know, we've had these discussions of, like, what's a good number? What's the number that we think we could live with, you know, whether is it 70%, 75%, 80% of funding your liability. And so, you know, I think some of these utilities and cities that we've seen in the past had, you know, not funded, and they have to go into bankruptcy and all kinds of things like that. So just trying to be responsible to our ratepayers,
Mhm.
you know, so that, hey, if something were to happen, we're not going to go clamoring for a lot of money because we don't have it, versus, hey, we've got, you know, 80% of what we anticipated. And the thing is just prudent financial management.
And some of my prior life was dealing with some of this. And I remember the discussion was more about what percentage do we want to kind of target. And if I remember right, it was 80%. It was a county government north of here. And I think that was, as I remember right, it was like 80%. but some were at 70 and very few were above 80. That seemed to be, as I recall, that seemed to be the normal, acceptable percentage approach to these long-term liabilities. But, you know, if you want to be, because the other question I would have is, as we approach Measure J and some legal options, what makes us look the strongest? And for credit rating purposes.
Right.
And I think that may be an argument that we may want to just consider this in relation to that as well.
That's a great point. And that's part of the reason why we need to have a reserve policy and a debt policy before we go for a shadow rating. Any credit rating agency is going to ask for this. Well, show us your policies. We want to make sure, you know, they'll ask for a number of things from debt management ratios to your policies, the quality of your management and things like that. But they want to know that someone is actually looking at these things and is staying on top of, you know, liabilities, future expenses, and has a structured way of looking at it and dealing with these risks down the line. So
Yeah, well, that's why I like the policy. I mean, I like having a policy. I don't know what's in the policy, but having a policy. Okay, sorry, guys.
all good stuff. So to your point on the 80% funded ratio, I think this is a two-part policy where the pension OPEB strategies recommend a certain funded ratio. We aren't targeting 100% funded ratio because we recognize that the money in the stock market can fluctuate a lot. And, you know, there's discount rate, present value of money. If CalPERS changes the discount rate, the liability, you know, goes up or down. So there are other like things that come into play. The policy proposes 80% target, and therefore the minimum target, which is in column H, is lower than the total liability that we have. We are targeting 80% of our pension and OPEB liability. And so that flows into the last part of the policy, which is there are two ways an assignment can be made to any reserve. One is through the budget process. The other is through this policy process. And let's say if the general reserve is $2 million higher than our minimum threshold, then that 2 million will first get allocated to the capital project reserve up till the excess amount of the capacity fees from prior years. And then the remaining is getting allocated to the pension and OPEB reserve until we reach an 80% level. And so that's column I here. We took out the 2 million excess from general reserve, and that's distributed to the capital project reserve, and then half and half between pension and OPEB.
And that's just a hypothetical that we have 2 million.
That's hypothetical.
21,000.
Yeah. If I put 19 million, then there's no allocation. Then, you know, like,
21 million, my apologies.
yeah,
And this can vary from year to year, right?
Yeah.
Depending on your expenses, whether or not you're gonna allocate monies to the reserves or which reserves, you know, it just kind of depends on year to year. But I think it kind of sets the path for you to establish and the goal to obtain these reserves, whether or not you can put $500,000 into those every year may not happen, but at least you're marching towards that goal.
So a question through the chair.
Yeah.
So what you're asking for is a policy that allows you to allocate the excess without having to get approval every time, or coming back and saying, this is how much excess we have, this is where we want to distribute it. Or is it a policy that just says per policy, this is how we're going to distribute the access? We don't really need to ask permission every single time.
exactly. There will be a consistent way on how excess funding gets distributed to certain reserves, which will get reflected in the financial statements that the auditors prepare.
And even if you were to come back to the board, the policy would be a staff report that says, as per the policy you created, we are asking your permission to put this here, this here, this here. And it's really good to have that on paper because it defines your trustworthiness. You're in, you're in good shape because you have a plan to be strong.
Agreed. Yeah, so we could bring it to the board and say, pursuant to, so-and-so policy, this is the distribution of funds to these reserves.
This might lead to more discussion at the board level about just how we're approaching our finances. It's more than just a budget, and it's more than just a budget. It's how we're looking at future liabilities. But until we settle down, we still have a little up and down issue about we're dealing with. I mean, and inflation is not even part of my thought process here, but our costs go up. Our revenues hopefully go up more than inflation. But at some point, we're going to chip into the reserve funds that are available. And we just need to be careful about how we treat that. That's all. And it's going to come back to the board anyway. And I'm just assuming that we may have a little more of a discussion about this piece of the budget more than we've had in the past. Simply because we have a policy now about how we want to treat that money.
Right.
And so,
Correctly, because I missed that meeting. This all came from your strategic planning session where you said you wanted to have policies for reserves. Is that accurate?
I think there was some reference to it. I can't remember the.
Yeah, 5 of our strategic objectives for this year are to have a reserves policy and to look at our pension OPEB strategies, like how are we going to look? So this is all just us trying to meet that objective for this year.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. Yeah.
Good. Okay. There's.
So that's the policy part, and this ties into the second part of the policy, pension OPEB strategies, where we said the district would like to eventually have a Section 115 trust. And we'll discuss the pros and cons last time, so I won't go into the details. The biggest advantage is money in the trust grows at a much higher rate because it's invested in the market. If we just keep it in our reserve, there's no interest going into it, it's static. And the downside is once you put money in the reserve, then it can only be used for that because it's a trust fund.
In the trust, when you put money in the trust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the thought process, I think the general manager's thought process was, let's hold off on putting it in the trust until we know what's going to happen on the Measure J front.
But do we want to have the trust option in the policy or not?
Yes, we should. I think all public agencies, especially the big ones who look at this closely, have a Section 115 trust. And I mean, we should, at some point when the policies are adopted, we should have a resolution that gives us the ability to apply for a trust.
Because we don't even looking to the future with potential Measure J obligations, this obligation doesn't go away no matter what. So even if you open the trust and even just put a little amount in it, you have this obligation no matter what happens in the future.
That is right. Yeah, it's not going away. We'll have to pay these funds eventually.
So the trust is just another vehicle as a reserve. It just has a higher performing vehicle.
And you can't use it for anything else at any point in time.
It's a car built for the Autobahn.
Yeah, if we're gonna go on the Autobahn.
I just had a question. Do the employees pay into the pension reserve and the OPEB reserves at all? I mean, is it part of the deduction from their check? Like I pay for Medicare out of my check. Is that something they put into, like we put into Social Security, that sort of thing?
I'll try not to go into too detailed, but for OPEB, retiree medical, we don't have anything.
Okay.
So it's a pay as you go. We get the checks so that the retirees will say, hey, I need to get reimbursed based on my MOU at that time. and the district just cuts a check for $540. There's no like CalPERS like thing. There's no trust that's set up for paying retirement expenses. And if we have a Section 115 trust, then that would be the vehicle where we accumulate money to pay those retirees.
Got it.
For pension, it's a little more complex. Every paycheck, we pay a certain amount to CalPERS, and it's called the normal cost of payment. And then we have the unfunded accrued liability that we pay once a year. That's the big fat check that we just wrote for 700,000. But those two go to CalPERS, and then CalPERS pays the
Pension.
pension
But
to
the
CalPERS.
employee doesn't actually pay into that out of their check, do they?
When they were employed.
When they were employed, yes,
But it was a deduction in their check.
yes.
Yeah,
Depending on
an
which-
employee,
Yeah.
not as a retiree.
Not as a retiree.
Correct, yeah. As an employee, though, they did pay into that plan. So they are kind of expecting something when they retire because they paid into it.
Yeah, so everybody pays into CalPERS that is a CalPERS employee, but because of this unfunded situation, it also depends on what years they were CalPERS, because at a certain point in time, the state changed the plan
Right.
because they knew they wouldn't be able to continue to pay.
So they,
And so some have their full, you can correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
well-
but some have their full paycheck for life, and then others are now only gonna get a portion of their
Got it.
paycheck.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There's a retirement formula. The older employees get a better formula, and the younger ones don't.
That's
And
like,
sometimes several steps. But anyway, it's not just one step, it may be.
Yeah.
It's how many years you paid to get to that point, even the old system.
Yeah.
You had to work a certain number of years.
To get
I mean, even though the trust account would be, sealed tight, you can't use it for anything but that one thing. I still think we ought to have the option in the plan, so that the plan is complete. And whether we use it or not is our choice.
Yeah,
And whether you recommend against it or for it, either way, it's a choice down the road. And I just like the plan to be complete, that's all.
that could also be a recommendation, I think, from us. It's to, however you think you'd word it, but that they're, whether it's funded at this point in time, some language about the 115 trust fund, that it's something we want to, either you set it up with a small amount, or it's direction that when feasible, that section 115 gets set up. I don't know, but that it would be the direction from this policy committee that it's something that's of interest.
And just,
So like,
all of these
the
things
seed
we implement
funding,
later, that the point is,
Yeah.
we have them in paper and where they're available and they're described about how they might be used or the process of getting them used and getting them funded, whatever.
Especially since, if I heard you correctly, you said those $400 checks could come out of the trust,
yeah,
so would no longer be coming out of the district.
yes, if the plan is sufficiently funded, then that would be the case.
Mhm.
So anyways, completing this discussion, what this other box is showing is it's combining the reserves with the assignments, and then it's adding that to the current funded ratio. So let's say our current funded ratio for the pension liabilities is 75%, and our current funded ratio for OPEB is only 13%. So 13% is basically dividing 700 by 5.2 million, so that's 13%. And if we were to move this 1.2 million, which is adding the existing reserve and the assignments together, then we will reach, let's say, 23% on the OPEB funded ratio, and then 77% for the pension funded ratio. So what this is trying to show is, as we put money in, we are coming closer to our 80% target over time. And that's what this could look like if this is obviously just a exercise for now. And then eventually we would like to take money out of the trust and give it to PERS to actually reduce the ratio, because that's what reduces the ratio. If we have money set aside, even CalPERS is still going to say this is your funded ratio, but we have money here to reduce it when we want. But until we give to CalPERS, the ratio doesn't get reduced.
So no matter what happens in the future financially, like if we get to that 80% with CalPERS, like no matter what the market conditions are or in the future, we are guaranteed that we've met that 80%.
Yes, and I have to say that the 80% will keep moving. Like, let's say we we touch 80%, next year we're at 79, then we're at 81. So we'll just have to see, like wait and watch and make a judgment call at that point.
But they would then have an obligation to cover. I'm just trying to
Yes.
say, like, what would put us as a district in the safest position? And that would be, not being able to predict the future, ensuring that CalPERS is covering that obligation versus the district. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes, absolutely. CalPERS will pay the obligation, and if it doesn't have enough money, it's going to come to the district and say, you need to pay us. But instead of them saying, hey, we're trying to avoid a situation where we don't have to pay a big lump sum to CalPERS because we have already planned this out. We'll give them in small increments and keep that bucket full instead of like putting like, a big chunk of money and giving it to them. So that's the situation that we're trying to avoid. 80%, if that's the consensus, is a good target. That doesn't eliminate our unfunded liability. I am a little too conservative and I would target 100%, but 80% is a good start. And it's, I think, consistent with what you've seen with other public agencies.
So I have two questions. One's related, one's not. But if we went with the trust, there's a certain amount of money that makes sense if you're going to invest it somewhere, whatever that chunk is. And I'm just going to say $250,000 because that's normally the chunk that you work with. But 100,000 may not be a good enough number just to have something on the books. So at some point, the pattern of investment, I mean, the size of the investment should be considered in terms of how it's invested, how the allocations are made, so that we're not burdening you with $50,000 and So anyway, that's the point that's relative. The one that's not relative is when so let's just say we're down the road and Measure J is starting to move in our favor, and now we're going to look at taking on employees from Cal-Am. Now they bring a boatload of individuals compared to what we have now. We have 28 or so staff. We're going to end up with another 75 people added to our staff, something like that. Whatever that process is, that's going to be totally independent of anything we're talking about here, because the settlement is going to have to be financed somehow, and the whole settlement will be in that financing picture.
Yes.
Kind of unrelated to our finances. I mean, our ability to afford it, that's one thing. But our structure on accounting for it isn't relevant to whatever's in the future.
I'd like to clarify that, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Let's say if we are an organization that's 4 times bigger than what we are, our working capital needs will also be correspondingly bigger. So let's say the 50% of our operating reserve, instead of 6 million, might be 20 million at that time. And so the direction of the policy could still apply conceptually, because now we still need enough money for 6 months of operations, just the money has increased. And to the financing portion, if we were to finance, working capital should also be financed, because we won't have that capital, initially. And so that would need to finance that working capital, and that would become our part of like the new treasury that we have. But I'm sure it requires a lot more thought than this, but that's.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to plug in where my brain goes sometimes, and I'd like to have a little, pinpoint.
Yeah, and if we were to absorb those employees, then they become into the PERS system. So then you see your liability potentially grow, and whatever policies that we adopt still apply. right? We're still going to try to manage that liability into the future. We'd like to be responsible in how we do that, things of that nature. So,
Okay. Okay, yeah, so the policy could still apply, it's just the numbers are suddenly,
yeah,
4 times bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and a lot of, so if you going from private to public, those employees would come in at the latest PERS system. And it's about an equal split between the district's contribution and the employee contribution. And so those liabilities aren't going to be that much into the future because that is a pretty favorable calculation.
Mhm.
It was some of the older employees that the calculation was a lot different, is that the district paid more than what the employee was contributing, and that's why it kind of helps accelerate that liability. That make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, because the composition of the workforce at Cal-Am will come in not as all new members,
No, they will come in.
as all new members, okay, because the historical relationship is out the window because it's a new relationship, okay. Which is a lower contribution
Yeah,
level.
In fact, it's worth
For
looking.
us, lower contribution level.
Yes.
Yeah. Like some public agencies are also starting to offer 401k plans. So we should look into the pros and cons of putting everyone in CalPERS versus, if they have a 401k, then let's just like have them continue with whatever their current benefits are in terms of matching. Maybe that's better for the district in terms of its future liability. So there are a lot of other discussions that need to happen. We need to look at HR and benefits, payroll and benefits like together. And have this come into play whenever we make that call.
Would that qualify as a meet and confer obligation?
Yes.
Okay,
But yeah, meet and confer doesn't always mean meet and agree. We would have to meet and talk about it,
Okay.
and then whether or not we'd have to bargain over it would depend on the status of the organization.
okay, the organization of,
The workers that are coming in.
okay, their organization. Okay. Okay. Sorry, didn't want to get too far ahead, but that's a little bit.
So should I continue then?
Yeah, no, please, this is helpful, even though it's hard to read, but I'm following you.
So this is what it says. So this looked at the reserves policy and the pension OPEB strategies and how implementing the policy would look like for both policies. I can switch gears to the other policies if that's okay. Because those are more in the operating world. These were more trying to meet the strategic goals. And the reason we are proposing those policies is while we're looking at financial policies, let's just do a thorough job and look at all the requirements that are out there.
This is why this report is twice the size of the last report we looked at.
Yes, more work, but I hope it will put the district in a good position. So the next two policies are very small. They're only one-page policies. Those help us do things that haven't been able to do, and it's more providing consistent direction on how to deal with certain unclaimed funds. So I'll go with this policy. It's called the unclaimed money policies, and this is establishing what's called escheatment guidelines, which is just a complex way to say that the district has the ability to reclaim unclaimed funds beyond a certain period, and that period is 3 years. If I may show you something, because this will help us explain a little better. I think I had it here, and if not, that's okay. So what the district, what the accounting staff does is it reconciles every bank transaction with what's on our books every month. This is called the bank reconciliation process. And every month, there is a set of outstanding payments that are part of that reconciliation, and they have stayed there since 2012. We're trying to just clear out those outstanding payments. So this is what it looks like. This is a thing that's done every month. We look at every check, every transaction, and we said, yes, we account for this transaction in the bank. At the very end, there are cleared payments and outstanding payments. And these outstanding payments are on our books. They belong to prior years. And this is money that we have paid a vendor, but the vendor hasn't encashed it. And we have reached out to these vendors several times. But since these payments are so old, we haven't received any response. Once a public agency has made reasonable efforts to reach out to these entities, there's a process to reclaim these funds back. And that process is, we publish these payments in a newspaper of general circulation for two times. And then we try to still reach out. And if we don't get any response, then we can reclaim those funds. And that's all we're trying to do here. All these old outstanding checks would get cleared out from our books. And these go, way back to, so you can see 2016, 17, 18, 19.
I saw 2013 in there.
Yeah, I mean,
And there's people that are no longer alive
Yeah.
on that.
that could very well be the case. And so this policy is basically saying the money will come back to the district after 3 years, once we have done our due diligence process in terms of outreach. And the second part of the policy says that if we have written a rebate and it's an outstanding rebate, we aren't considering a rebate as unclaimed because so the district reserves the right to reclaim the rebate if it remains uncashed after 1 year. Because a rebate is not a service performed by someone, it's just money that we've given someone, and if they don't cash it and we have reached out to this rebate holder, then we'll just take it back. That's all the policy is saying. It's just it will help us with our operations. And I can continue on to the next one.
What's our current practice on that? How long will we go?
We don't have a practice. That's why it stays there.
Oh, okay.
I can switch to the budget policy. This one should be fairly simple because this isn't new any new information. This is stuff that the board had approved earlier. It wasn't. This is Exhibit 3E. This is a one-page budget policy. This is just formalizing the intent of the board from an earlier time. We just simplified the wording, but we have retained the intent. And that is basically having a balanced budget every year, trying to seek out outside funding sources, making sure that we fully recover the cost of our service provided. And if there is a reduction in budget, then it has minimum impacts on district residents and also, doesn't adversely affect the environment. So these are all great goals aspirations to have, and this is what the board approved in 2005. We just didn't put that into a policy document, and this is what we're doing. The only additional piece of information here is the level of budgetary control. This means at what point will staff come and get a board approval if the budget changes? So if there is an increase in budget, at what level? So there are different levels. These are called budgetary controls, like budget at the account level versus the department level versus the fund level versus the organization level. So at which level, if there is a change in the budget, will staff come and seek board approval? And this policy says that the level of budgetary control is at the fund level. So if the budget at the fund level were to increase, staff will have to come to the board. If budget at the account level would increase, then staff won't, because at the fund level, it hasn't gone up, if that makes sense. So account level could be, let's say, training expenses versus fuel expenses. You know, one could go up, one could go down, but as long as the budget doesn't increase at the fund level, you know, that's fine. And so this policy is just determining the level of budgetary control. This is something that we have to tell the auditors every year, and they have come back and said, well, what is your policy? And then we just like say things, but I think we would just like to be consistent and say, well, our policy is at the fund level.
Which, at that level, it becomes a management decision, moving money around between accounts, as opposed to a board decision to move money at these lower level accounts.
Exactly.
And so trying to separate what's administration and what's policy. So,
Right.
okay.
So that's the gist of the budget policy. It's just a one-page document.
So I'm just curious, in 2005, when they set this policy, which was 6 months of operating expenses? Is that the policy we're talking about?
Well, I think
2005, or was it
this is the policy from 2005. I don't believe it talks about 6 months of operating expenses.
What's the source of the 6 months of need?
Well, it says 50% of the
Annual budget.
Oh, yeah, 50% of the annual budget.
My note to myself was 50% with a question mark, and I didn't know whether it was 6 months when you said, or 50%. Anyway,
Is that on the policy?
It said that on the 2005 and 6 one. When the other document you had up just a second ago?
Well, I'm curious
Second
about-
or third
Yeah,
bullet point there.
right.
the only thing I'm curious about
Second
is
bullet.
how long have we been within the policy guidelines of 6 months or 50%? I mean, because I thought Dave told me once that when he got on board, he made sure we hit the 50%, or whatever that target was. And before that, it was hit and miss or something, I guess. I don't know.
That could very well be true.
We need that.
We can look into it.
Just curious.
Yes, I mean, since Dave came on board, like our financial operating picture has, you know, we are in a much better position,
Yeah.
for sure. And I was told that there was a time when we couldn't, like, we had to like cut staffing expenses and, you know, do some drastic thing.
No, I remember before Dave, but there was some, you know, shaky times. And, yeah. Okay, that was just a curiosity question about how long have we been able to meet that target?
We can give you a precise answer, but I'm sure it has been
I
For a long
may have
time.
David, maybe like a board meeting. Test his memory.
The last piece of the policy is what's called a debt management policy. This is a requirement that's issued by the state. In 2017, SB 1029 was passed, and the California Debt Investment Advisory Commission now requires public agencies to have a debt management policies that has 5 elements. And those 5 elements are captured in this debt policy. It goes over under what conditions we would issue debt, what would be the debt limits, and how we would administer that debt. And I won't go into a lot of details, but there are guidelines for debt issuance. For instance, debt can only be issued for a capital project, you know, where the costs kind of justify the financing, there's a critical need, there's an identified revenue source, and where the overall project costs exceed the available resources that the district has. And then it goes on to additional criteria, like the life of a capital project needs to be higher than the debt term. And these are like standard requirements that a lot of other public agencies use when they issue long-term debt. Also paying attention to credit worthiness, maintaining the highest possible credit rating, and making sure that we at least maintain an investment grade rating, which is, you know, triple B or higher. And then this is all according to SB 1029. They want the policy to describe the types of financing instruments that we would have. So that's what this section goes into: general obligation bonds, revenue bonds, lease financing. We talk about debt limits. We aren't a municipality, so we don't have general obligation debt. But if we were, then there are certain guidelines that the total amount of the debt could not be more than 15% of the property valuation in that jurisdiction. But we will follow those government codes if they were to apply to us. At this point, we intend to issue what are called revenue bonds based on expected utility revenues. And then there are.
So what you're saying is it doesn't apply to special districts, but you want to have a policy that it does apply to local government in general.
Yes.
I mean, I know we're talking cities, but
Yeah.
we're just trying to be in that same category of thought.
So SB 1029 doesn't apply to special districts?
It does. It does apply to special.
Okay.
And then the next section is there are a lot of public agencies, not public, excuse me. There are agencies out there from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which I guess is a public agency, the IRS, and the MSRB, which stipulate additional requirements that we need to follow when we are to issue debt. And they range from disclosure requirements to what are called arbitrage requirements. And I won't go into it in detail, but we are supposed to pay tax if we start making money, collecting debt and investing it into a higher investment yield, then that is a tax. So there are these requirements that come into play. And this policy is just saying, hey, these are the things that you need to follow. So that's all the reporting and controls. Again, SB 1029 wants us to speak to controls. And so we're clubbing reporting and controls here. And then finally, it wants us to have a section on the use of debt proceeds, and we will have internal controls where we can certify that the debt is being used for the purpose for which it was issued. And so that's this 8th bullet point. So that's the gist of the debt management policy. Again, we can come back and make changes to it, but I feel like we don't have a policy right now. And if we were to issue debt, we're required to have this, and the rating agencies would certainly ask for it. So it's just preparing us towards that future.
And when Michelle and I were at the CSDA conference, we were sitting in on the same session about public financing, and we were talking to underwriters and bond counsels and all that kind of stuff. And they were really emphasizing the importance of establishing these policies with your organizations ahead of time, preparing you to go out and issue, debt or whatever. So, in my opinion, we're just really trying to prepare ourselves down the road for the ability to do any of these kinds of things. Plus, the agency or the district is, debt free.
Yeah.
And it's just a great place to be. And then having this set up ahead of time, you're not playing catch up, basically.
Has there been a time yet where there's been a credit rating assigned with the district, or we're looking to the future?
Well, I think we're looking into the future, and I think that's what he said, the shadow rating. You can, look ahead to see what you think you would get.
Yeah.
In the future.
It makes sense. I mean, I'm not feeling like there's a lot more that we could do in terms of whether or not we're ready to go to the board with these, just to have this discussion at that level. But George, I'm all ears if there's stuff you want to engage further on.
Well, I would like to be a little more comfortable with how this is structured and presented to the board, and I would like to just say I'm all in, as opposed to saying
You still have questions.
I'm still a little curious about A or B or something.
Perfect, understood.
And it's a big move. I think it's a big move. It's an important move.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just like to have a little more time on it. And, you know, and this has been good. This is your sample example, you know, of the numbers themselves. And I can understand a little more, the approach that, you know, you're considering or management's considering in general. So it just helps me understand a little more. And I feel like our board needs to have some backup
Mhm.
policy like this. And it'll be a good move to do this. I'm just not quite
Quite there.
today.
So a very helpful presentation for me. I'm much clearer now than I was.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I would love to have all committee members 100% in before we go to the vote. So any changes, I'm all for it, you know. If there are any tweaks that need to be made. In terms of presentation, I would like to get a better direction if, like how we could all, you know, present
I
it.
got some ideas. I think Dave has some ideas and George wrote some notes down. I think we may have some ideas. Maybe we could bring it back to the committee next month with some of your thoughts and our thoughts.
I'd just like to see a numbering system in there, A, B, you know, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, because the other policies that I looked at are just very simple statements. This is pretty involved. So I would just like, if any of us have a question, can we say, instead of page 22,
Uh-huh.
can we say, you know, under section, you know, 7A? Just so we can track it and so we can understand it, just how we refer to it. Anyway, that's just organizing the material.
Put it on pleading paper.
So I'm okay. I think we are. And Becca, do you have any other the things to add?
No, I like the idea of a trust for your pension holders, simply because they paid into that and that's their money, and to be able to tap into it for emergency funds seems like you're taking away for something that they worked very hard for. And so I like the idea of a trust that we're guaranteeing our employees, and it looks good for the district to say we guarantee that our employees will have their pension whenever they retire. I'm sure Sarah would like to know that the money that she's is going to be there whenever she gets ready to retire.
Yes, I would like confirmation.
Confirmation.
Okay, so we understand ourselves, we understand, and next time we'll probably be recommending it with much less discussion, but at least recommend it to the board. But there'll be some discussion.
Well, and I agree with you that it'll make it easier for the board because there's 3 of us.
Right.
And to have them go, oh, you know, I know you all discussed this, but I would like to suss out this section such and such, paragraph such and such, because that isn't clear to me. Rather than go through every single line item, you know. Maybe they'll read it before they come to the board.
Yeah, and it's our job to kind of look into, you know, what the words mean.
Yeah. But you know there's going to be questions.
I have a capital improvement committee meeting that starts at 3:30 that I have to be in a different building for. So I have to get on the road, but you do still have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
My apologies, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for giving us your time when you can. I know you're a busy person.
was here, that was really good.
So item 3 will be continued, no action, specific item, for that. Item number 4 is, these are updated from items 4 and 5. Anything to report? The expenditures on Measure J. I think I'm the one that raised the question about, we have several little accounting categories based on dates. And it's not, there's no summary total of all of that.
There's a
Let
subtitle.
me just finish.
Sorry.
I remember raising a question about, should we have a summary total of these five little, calendar count tallies? And then on second thought, and then I don't remember whether it was one of these meetings or whatever, I had a change of heart. And saying, no, let's just keep it the way it is.
Mhm. I recall that, yes.
And so. Anyway, I'm okay with keeping it separate. I do add them up just so I kind of know what that number looks like. But
And this exhibit 4A is for over $25,000, right? These are your contracts over 25,000.
Yes. That's right.
oh, I jumped to the next chart.
You jumped to five,
I'm
man.
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I was on number 5.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm sorry. No. I jumped ahead. That was my fault. Yeah, so we're on the 25 and over. I think there was some effort to wrap up some of these contracts rather than continue to show them. How did that discussion or question end up? Do we still show expenditures? No, we only show active accounts, don't we?
Only active contracts, that's right. This Excel file used to be 3 pages long, if you remember. Now it's 1.5 pages. So we did clean a lot of.
All right,
old
no, it's
contracts.
better when it's current events, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Keep me tally of that. Okay, unless there are any more comments, thanks Becca for
Yeah.
kind of getting back on schedule here. So my comments about totaling up the things was related to number 5, and I have no other questions. I have no questions anyway. Except for just the general information, I tallied this up. This is over a period of 6 years and a few months, 6 years. So it's 3.6 million. So it's about $600,000 a year on average for Measure J. I know we spent most of it in the first 3 years. But anyway, that's the point to make. Let's jump to the agenda next week, our next regular board meeting. Just to have a little summary of what's coming.
So we'll be going to closed session at 5:00. I have 3 items to discuss there. And those are listed on the agenda. We'll take those up and then reconvene back at 6:00. Couple items that you'll hear in the regular board meeting will be the quarterly water budget. And then you'll hear an item about modifying rule number 60 in relation to the groundwater basin and wells. That's number 9, the revised maps for controlled drinking water for Pure Water Monterey. That's in conjunction with some of the Department of Drinking Water and the waste discharge requirement that Monterey Wind Water is doing. We're just trying to provide a map that shows where the district has influence as to where drinking water wells can be sited. So we're just updating number 9. And
Will we be removing item number 10?
Yes.
Just back up, Mike, on a second here. Will either item 8 or item 9, even item 7, do they go to the committees?
generally, I think a lot of those will go to either the water demand or the water supply committee.
Okay,
And like a lot of this is like the quarterly water budgets. Yeah, those would go to the committee.
okay. I'm mainly interested in the map.
And number 9,
9 was the one.
number 9, it was kind of a last minute deal due to the waste discharge requirement. And so it didn't have time to go to a committee. So we're just bringing it right to the whole board.
Okay, and that's
The revised map.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
And should be it.
Okay. Let me just warn you, Mike, on item number 5, director reports. I had a short conversation with Karen Paul and we were both at the same conference. And we both felt like it was an outstanding conference.
Mhm.
And we got a lot of things churning. She does, I do. So what we want to do is bring back, anyway, so what I want to do, I promised her I would try to do this, is set aside just a little more time than normal for that item so that she has a chance to report on the highlights that she had. I have a chance to report on the highlights that I had. And whether that leads to anything, maybe it might lead to some points for the strategic planning session. I don't know when that's scheduled now. But we both were thinking, what might be the structure of the strategic plan? I think we do that in January or February. Like, I just can't remember exactly.
It was February, I believe. You
Okay.
guys had them. It was right before I showed up. Is it February, March?
I believe it was
Okay.
March. We did have some discussion about trying to have it earlier next year.
Okay, okay. And we both just, as anticipation, this is not a decision, obviously,
think-
but we both thought that the structure we've had works.
Director Edwards did bring that up at
Yeah.
a recent board meeting about moving the strategic workshop up earlier in the year to allow for more planning for that year.
Okay, no, and I think that's a good idea. I mean, okay, there's just a lot going on and it's just hard to get your mind around everything that's going on.
So, Chair Riley, are you referring to item 6 for the,
Yes,
okay,
he said 5, but
I said
it's 6.
maybe it looked like 5 without my glasses.
that's why.
Item number 6.
A lot. You know.
Just to that point though, since we're touching on 3 of the cases in closed session, I think I'll do an abbreviated report out on our litigation report for the public. Because it is printed for them to read as well, but there isn't that much new public knowledge. We're gonna have in-depth discussion on the 3 cases in closed session. So just wanted to put that on the radar.
Okay. But those are good public reports. I mean, I think it's really,
We continue to put it in the packet and I'll touch briefly on each case. But don't feel the need, unless you direct me otherwise, I don't feel the need to go into in depth.
no, and if the 3 cases you're gonna report on are already covered in closed session, then I think there's less questions, less dialogue, less a lot.
Right.
Okay. And then the public may have a couple of questions, but they hardly ever ask questions in your.
And when we answer their questions unless.
That's right. And I'm definitely not gonna tell you to. I may respond a few times, but I wouldn't ask you to. All right, we're done. We done? Meeting adjourned.